Hello everyone! So what I'm about to show you next, it was supposed to be a podcast episode, but after having the conversation, I really wanted to put it on YouTube so you all can see it. So I interviewed a self-taught software engineer, Courtney Riveda, and he talked about his story, his upbringing, and then how he self-taught himself to become a software engineer and now where he is now. And this conversation is long, so make sure you get yourself some water, a snack, and let me just do a intro before we get started. And this was the reason why I wanted to interview him. But it said, meet Get Fit Dev. Get Fit Dev is Courtney. Grew up in foster care system to the hood. He wasn't supposed to make it, but here he is, coding and thriving, living proof that your past can't and shouldn't determine your future. So super excited for you all to hear this conversation, and let's just get into it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think on the Black Coders Instagram page, I think they did a great job explaining that. Like you said, my name is Courtney Riveda. I'm 24 years old and I live in Sacramento, California. I work for Sacramento County, who, in the department that I'm actually with, helps foster youth and social workers alike. I am born and raised here. I grew up in foster care and I grew up in some of the worst parts in Sacramento. There's this rundown area in Meadowview and where there's like trap houses and stuff like that. And people were like getting shot and stuff like that. So it was as hood as Sacramento can get. And eventually, by the time I was 18, moved away from college in Oregon, then moved to Maryland for an internship, and then eventually made my way back here to Sacramento. 100% and like emotionally available to make a difference and be able to actually talk about my story and help people understand that there is another group of people that lack awareness and to help provide that voice and advocate for them where they can't advocate for themselves.
I love that so much. And then you said you grew up in the foster care system. So I feel like there's so many
Mhm.
misconceptions about that. And I just really wanted to know how was it like for you? How was your childhood or just your experiences?
Yeah, so most foster youth, every one of them are typically like unique, like most people. But lately, as I'm coming more in contact with other foster youth, because I'm part of a community called Get Fit Code, and two of the people that we mentor are also foster youth. And so when we're communicating back and forth and we're teaching them how to code, you can hear like the parallels and the similarities that we all share. And it's really crazy. So it's not just unique to myself, but this is a system thing. It's where we're not having an institution that can actually support the growth and nourish like these kids. So growing up for me, I was put in foster care at 2 years old, and I was been in the system from 2 to 18. I come from a very like unique background, and it's a lot for most people to understand. I ended up in the system because my parents, biological parents, were deemed unfit because biological mother was a former prostitute, huge drug addict, and a habitual liar. And my biological father is not much different, as you know, he was also a pimp, alcoholic, drug addict, and I'm actually a twin. And my younger brother, who's 10 months younger than I am, we all were together when we ended up in foster care. And we got taken away because my biological mother tried to sell us. And it's very hard to actually remember the details of it. But I just remember like hearing loud bang on the door, flashing lights, police, and that began my journey into the system. And from there, from about 2 to 8 years old, it was home after home, and always wondering, why are my parents coming? Why do my parents love me? And with most foster care homes, there's about, I say minimum like 6 kids to about 14, 15 kids. And it's like this rotating door where it's like going to an animal shelter where you're like, oh my gosh, like this is a cute animal. I'm going to adopt it. And same thing with like younger kids. You go into a foster care home and they're like, oh my gosh, this is a cute little young child. I'm going to adopt it. And while older kids and people who have siblings are like further and further pushed back on that list. And a very common trait in foster homes is physical or emotional abuse. If the foster guardian that you have has a biological child that stays in the home, typically you will receive these notions that like, hey, their biological child is worth more than you. and they're not afraid to tell you that. And
Mm-hmm.
each foster parent is allocated money from the government that goes towards the child that they're like fostering. But more often than not, that money never goes to the foster youth itself. It actually goes to the parent and they use it, abuse it, and never actually help the child in need. So that kept happening. And along with like physical abuse, like so beatings were very common, and it kind of sucks that we grew up a little bit in the generation where like physical um, physical abuse was very much happening for children, and their turns to kind of like, oh, like if you don't do this, you're gonna get a spanking or some sort. And growing up in the Black community, that was very common, and so that was like a normalized thing for me. And so my grandmother, we met her on my dad's side, and the police dropped us off. So we're in this whole new environment. Never met her, never even knew who my family was, and it was all like really scary. Because 8 years old, all you know is like, oh, this is like this is family. So I'm like, oh my gosh. And so she already had 6 kids, 6 kids by herself, and she already had 6 other adopted kids as well. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like it's like another group home. Here we go. And they really preached this idea that blood's thicker than water. And because we share the same last name, they really made it clear that, hey, we're going to treat you better than these 6 other adopted kids that are here. And I was like, no, I I didn't understand 100% what was happening or could even express like that's bad, but I just knew that it was wrong to like mistreat people based on your background. And so my twin brother, my younger brother, fell into that trap and wanted to be loved. And you can't blame them because if you don't know love, you're gonna seek that out. And so that's kind of what happened. And as we moved around, we ended up in Metavu, the hood of Sacramento, and since all of our family had been in and out of jail, they know the ins and outs, how to sell drugs, how to get drugs, or and it's unfortunate that the males in our family, know how to manipulate emotionally and physically like women in order to get what they want, in order to create this like, hey, we're living life, and not following like the education system. And so my younger brother, Devonte, he he was like full 100% on board with this idea. He's like, why do I need school? So he initially just joined a gang at I think about like 10 years old. He joined a gang and really started working towards that. My twin brother, he was like the pretty boy. He like was all about like chasing girls and really just having a fun lifestyle. And so he tried to just never be home and try to like run amok. And me, I was so enthralled by escaping the current situation. I was just focused on books because that was the only sense of normalcy that I got. And the other adopted kids were treated pretty much like how we were treated in group homes, where you're just another number, not really cared about. And so the fact that I showed any type of emotion towards them, showing that I cared versus like treating them different, like the way my family did, my own biological family labeled me as a traitor. And they definitely told me that every single day. Anytime I showed any type of love towards the other foster youth, they were like, well, you're not one of us. You're not one of us. You can't be one of us for doing that. And it got bad to the point where my biological dad finally joined into our life. And since he's an alcoholic, he came in, and I remember my grandmother and my aunt sitting on the bed, and he was just like yelling in my face about, what it means to be a Reveda, what's it meant to be a man. And he like eventually like started choking me out. And I remember passing out for like a split second before being dropped to the floor. And it was like all happened in a blink of an eye. I ended up like sprinting to the bathroom, locking the door, and like crying. And because that's like a very traumatic event. And so eventually, as time passed, all these things became like normalized, and along with the physical beatings because my grandmother, very old school, believed in the whole idea, I'm going to beat you not for what you did, but what you're going to do. And since my twin brother and my younger brother were part of like, the Riveda family, they were treated more special. And so they used me as a scapegoat and got out of punishments a lot more easy. And so, it wasn't just like normal beatings either where you get like a spoon or a smack or anything like that. It was always a trade off between like planks from your twin size bed, a switch from outside from a tree, that thin little branch that goes super fast, anything that she can get her hands on. And typically, you were like made to go shower first and then be naked as you're receiving this punishment. And the only way to lessen that punishment is if you held down the person that was getting beat before you. That's how you make sure that you don't get beat as hard or as long as the person before you. And it's really messed up if you really look back on it. And at the time, it's really hard to understand that, like, oh, this is completely wrong. But in order to survive, you kind of have to do whatever you got to do. Holidays weren't a holiday; it was like a normal day, and food was just another thing that was hard to come by. So dumpster diving was a thing. Pouring water in a milk jug just to get a little bit extra milk was also a thing. And it's all stuff that like I joke about now and look back on like, oh my gosh. But that was part of childhood and stuff that you try to put out. And eventually my grandmother passed away 2 weeks before freshman year of high school. And her kids like kicked out all the other foster kids. And since my twin brother and my younger brother, are all in the system, my twin brother went to go do something else. He stayed in high school, but he went to like a couple other different foster homes. My younger brother completely dropped out of high school and kept on this path of being a drug dealer. And myself, I stayed with that family and was walking to Valley High School from Menifee, which is a 5-mile walk, in order to get to school on time because we didn't have cars. We didn't have any type of support system to make you want to go to school. It was kind of like, well, if you want to go, then go. And for me, I was like, well, shit, I got to go. That's the only way I'm going to escape home and escape the environment. So I did that. And I eventually joined sports. And that's how I met my next foster family. And that was the Lewis family. And their son, Daniel, which was my best friend at the time, was like, oh, like, come live with us. It's going to be amazing. And I always describe the situation as kind of like a stranger in a candy van where you're promised like all these sweets and stuff if you just get in the van. And that's exactly what happened. And so eventually when I got in the van as a sophomore year in high school, at this point, I'm already like, well, life can't get worse. Home is awful. I'm not close with anyone in my family. And everyone's like, just doesn't care because I'm not contributing to them because I'm going to school while my younger brother's like supplying like money by selling drugs and, just doing his own thing. And my twin brother's nowhere to be seen. And for me, I was like, oh my, like, what's the point? And so by doing sports and talking to Daniel, I eventually was able to join their family as a kind of like foster youth again, I guess. And they were my foster parents. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be a great change. It's gonna be a lot of fun. It started off that way because, there's some peak wrestling season. So I was like, this is gonna be fantastic. But eventually you start to see things. And I thought being in my biological family was bad in terms of being different, in terms of skin color, because everyone in my family on my dad's side is black, and so we stand out like a sore thumb because, as you can tell, I'm not dark at all. And to see everyone in my family way darker than me, we already didn't look like them. And so now with my Filipino foster family, and the same things replicated. They consistently made fun of me for not having a pure bloodline background or not being the same skin tone, for the fact that I was, 5'11", bigger than their son and daughter. And so they definitely helped me generate an eating disability and body dysmorphia. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like I always saw myself bigger than what I was. And so I starved myself. And if you know anything about wrestling, starving yourself is already a common thing in that sport. So that already got worse. And just like the foster parents that I had growing up, um, they also didn't, my now foster parents didn't give me the money either. They kept it for themselves. They used that money to send their own biological son and daughter to judo trips, got them judo gis, and anything to kind of help better them and get them further in life. And just like most foster youth, you're just another paycheck. And so the only thing that was keeping me going at this point was college. It's like looking forward to this idea that, oh, I can be anything I want. I just got to make it. So going through this cycle of abuse all the way up to senior year, I applied to 14 different schools, got accepted to all 14 different schools. At this point, I never really considered myself, special or different. But when I started getting those acceptance letters back, 10 out of the 14 schools were full ride scholarships. They weren't just all state schools in California, but some of them were prestigious schools like Harvard, Yale, UCLA, UC Santa Barbara, UC Santa Cruz, University of Southern California, and like Stanford also being one of them. And like I remember getting those first acceptances and like opening each one and just like crying because like I was like, I'm finally getting out of here. Like I finally set off what I wanted to do. And I remember it's the end of April. Deadlines for applications are May 1st or the 2nd. And I remember, my foster mom like calling me down from the room. And she was just like, so like, have you picked a school? And I'm like, yeah, like, of course. And so I'm like excited, like blindly excited as I'm telling them stuff like that. And then they just hit me with like, by the way, we're not going to sign your financial aid paperwork. We're not going to let you fill out these applications. That way you can get, go to the school you're choosing. And, deadline is the day up. So I'm like, what do you mean? All you have to do is just click a signature. Like you have to do that and put your social security information in. That way I can get the money and then like go to the school. And they were like, no. They were like, we're not going to let you do better than our son. And he was going to go to San Jose State. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like what does it matter?
Wow.
But it was this whole image thing, and up to this point, like I was completely forgotten about, but as a person, but when they found out that 100% doing better than their son, they were like, no, like we already did the same sport and they recorded all his matches. We already lived in the same home. And when their parents came to live with us, like, I was forced to sleep on the couch or sleep on the ground in the house while their parents and my foster brother's grandparents took the room that was supposed to be given to me. And so I'm like, what else are you trying to take away by like making this outrageous decision? And so they finally were like, nope, too bad. It is what it is. And I remember just like sitting there and just locked myself in the room, which seems to be like a very common trait, and just kind of like thinking to myself, like, this is it. The one thing that I've always wanted and worked towards was just ripped away from me. I didn't choose the upbringing that I had. I didn't choose the high schools that I went to. And now the one thing that I thought I could decide for myself was gone. And so Friday went by. That Saturday became a little bit more hopeful. I was like, okay, like, I guess I'll join the military and then I'll go to college and figure it out from there, because at this point it's just escaping and surviving. Then Saturday went by. Sunday morning, I was like, no, I'm not going to let them do this. I'm not going to let anyone do this. So I started writing out an appeal letter after appeal letter after appeal letter. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to get into one of the prestigious schools like Harvard or Stanford because They have very limited spots, all very competitive. The fact that he got it in the first place is already like a reward in itself. And I'm just like, I just wanting to escape as far as I can. It doesn't even matter in the school. And so I ended up with Pacific University in Oregon. It's in Forest Grove, super, super small school where my high school is actually bigger than this college. But the fact that's in a different state, I was like, yes, I'm gonna leave. And so after a few emails from, I think her name is Dana Ramos, and after going back and forth, she was explained my appeal letter to the other advisory committee, and then got accepted, and they gave me my full ride. And so I was like, yes, like going to college. And then like slowly as I was packing stuff like that and get ready to head up to Oregon, most people get dropped off with their family, and yeah, everyone's like, oh my God, we're so happy for you. And they like stock your dorm. And me, I like just remember like putting my bag down by myself, state, like don't know anyone, no one knows who I am. And I'm just sitting there, they're like, this is like a sigh of breath air. And I was like I'm finally here, but also I knew personally I have a lot of emotional and mental things to overcome, because when you escape like trauma and the mental hold that it still has on you is still there, even though if you escape the situation. And so that's when I started getting therapy freshman year of college, because everyone's so excited about being able to choose the school, where my hand was forced. Like I didn't have a choice to go to the school that I wanted. And so I was just mad. I was mad at everything, just mad at life for putting me in a situation that I had absolutely no control of. And I was just like, there's nothing I can do. And so I still excelled in school. I mean, I graduated from high school with a 4.3, and then in college I maintained a 3.9, even though I was going through this like emotional thing. And because I just knew that if I didn't do it, there's no one else that was going to do it for me. So I constantly was just like, I have to do something. And even in college, my foster family still tried to emotionally abuse me and take advantage of me by opening up different bank accounts in my name. They opened up a credit card in my name and committed credit fraud, and just pretty much did anything and everything to really just push me further and further back. And I can't do anything to them because technically I am their foster child and they were my legal guardians. But as a person, I was just like no, I don't want anything to do with it. And so after like 4 years in Oregon, I was able to meet my older brother Sorrel, and he was talking to me about like software engineering and like web development, and because he's been coding since he was like 14 or 15. And I was like, oh shit, like I never even thought about tech. Not even like a thing I was really interested in. My degree is in health and nutrition, a minor in bio. I was pre-nurse, and it's just like what, And so when he's talking to me about this idea, I like was recently single, and I was like, if I'm gonna have any time to like choose something, I guess this is like now. And so I moved across the country to Maryland, where he was working for a startup company called MindRight, which is focused on mental health, which I thought was, really ironic that I'm going to a mental health startup that focuses on providing mental health services to youth who are typically come from like low income families and stuff like that. So it was just like everything that I always wanted to work with, because it resembles foster care. And so from there, I started teaching myself how to code. And he really made it clear, like saying like, hey, this is your thing. I'm not here to force you to do this. Like, this is all by choice. Like, he's like, I'm not your boss. I'm not your parent. It's like, he's like, I'm your big brother. But I'm actually I'm just blood. And I just want to help you grow. And so he helped outline some courses and different ideas on like what a web developer should know, and which is the mean stack. And that was my first stack. And for the next 6 months, just pure grinded. I worked 80-hour weeks, which 40 hours was coding and stuff with MindRight and learning how to code more and more. The other 40 hours was bartending at night. And so I can have a source of income to pay phone bill and insurance and stuff like that. And so I like sacrificed the idea of like relationships and going out and being 22 just so I can get further ahead. And then eventually, after those 6 months, got first job opportunity as a contractor. Moved to moved to LA, contracted around for a bit, and then just kept doing more and more. And then eventually landed a role here at Sacramento County. Moved back to Sacramento, and which was like an up and down thing because back where all the trauma began. So you're just like, oh my gosh. And I was like, well, I can't really deal with this. So got my own place, have my own dog, and continue on this journey. So yeah.
Woo! Let me process. Something I'm interested in is like the relationship with your brother and your family, and just
Mhm.
kind of like, because I can see some people holding a lot of like resentment just because of that dynamic. How has your relationship changed over time?
Yeah. So that's actually like a very good question. So coming from like that environment, um, it wasn't uncommon to start having children young or to, end up going to prison or jail since that's all we've known. My younger brother Devonte, he's currently in prison. He has two children. Um, I've never met. And I remember being contacted by one of my biological like aunts, and she was like, "Hey, like you're an adult now. Your brother's in this situation." Because I always heard stories through the grapevine about what was happening with him, but never really understood until I got the phone call saying, "Hey, like, would it be okay for your brother to have your number to like contact you?" And I was like, "Sure." And I didn't think anything of it, and because at the end of the day, it's just like you may have like been a huge asshole, but I can't blame you because it wasn't your fault. Like you were manipulated into thinking that this is okay and that this is what you had to do in order to feel okay. And so your trauma and the toxic experience puts you in a very terrible situation, and you know and you kind of fell for it. So I can't blame you or be mad at you entirely for doing that. And so when we talked, and it was very like nice, like hearing his voice, but I don't know who he is. The fact that you're in prison already speaks a lot, you know. And I was like, well, I'm gonna get to know you for now. You may be in prison, but I'm still gonna try. My twin brother is the very much opposite of I am, and last time I spoke to him, it was like back in March. He recently had like a um, doctor's emergency visit because his lung collapsed. And my twin brother is, very much traumatized and stuff as well. And Sorrel actually knows more about, my twin brother than I do because they had more relationship at the time um, than me and my twin, or me and my any of my siblings had. And so when I spoke to Corey, and he was just like talking to me and stuff, and it was strange. Like we were literally 2 minutes apart, but when I'm talking to him, complete stranger, don't know who he is, and once again, I'm not gonna like hate you or be mad at you. The way I see my younger brother and the way I see him is just, life put us in a situation, and you just had to do what you had to do. And kind of sucks that we all did different things, and now we're all somewhere else in life. And he lives in Reno. I think he works like two jobs, and yeah, so I'm happy in a way that he's not in prison and he's doing okay, but there's no actual resentment. Turns out relationship with me and Sorrel, we actually met when he was 14, and that's because our biological mother, got us all together. And that was like a very weird situation because she still was trying to like manipulate us because she is still doing drugs and stuff like that. And so Sorrel just moved to Sacramento and was in foster care. And so he was in a group home further away from us. So I actually didn't get to know him until maybe junior year of college, where he and I were talking more and actually trying to make that relationship. And now that when I first moved to Maryland, he and I, our relationship just got way better, and we just continue to foster that because when we come from nothing and we come from people who just don't recognize that you are meant to love one another, it it's so nice and refreshing to have a relationship with another person where there are no strings attached. There's no expectations that you have to give something back in order to receive love from someone else. And so
Mhm.
when he helped put me on the path of like learning how to code, I was like utterly grateful, for him opening up this whole new world, which I had no idea existed, or nor did I even care that it existed.
Yeah.
But he was just like, hey, like, here you go. Like, it's up to you. And the fact that he provided me an option was even better. And so he and I just considerably just got better and better. And now we're working on multiple projects together. We FaceTime and text every day. If I'm like dating someone or talking about dating someone, like, I talk to him about it. And it's just like that big brother, little brother relationship that you always wanted, because he's almost 3 years older than I am. So we're very much close in age, and he's married and has a kid coming. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's super exciting because he's actually doing the family thing right. And now I am being single and stuff, and he's just like, oh yeah, like, it's like the next person that you date, like, they get to be with Skylar and stuff like that. And so I'm like, oh, that's gonna be great. And then like now he likes to joke around and like talk to me. He's like, yeah, by the way, like you should wait until next year to think about dating. Especially with COVID and stuff. Just do you, keep doing you. He's like, you have a lot going on, and he's like, you want to like do all these things. He's like, it's gonna be hard to like give someone else attention if you're doing all these things. And so in every aspect of my life, he's trying to like be there and give me advice, even though sometimes I don't necessarily want it or need it. And like he and I have our ups and downs, just like any other sibling. But at the end of the day, it's nothing but love. And it's just amazing that he just wants to be there and provide some type of advice, either it would be in relationships, work, looking towards the future for, owning a business together or whatever it is, he wants to be there. And so when we created this community together and we're helping other people learn how to code, it's just a beautiful thing. And the fact that we're growing together and helping other people grow is like a dream come true almost.
I love that. And then if someone wants to help out, like with, like the foster care system in any way
Mhm.
possible, what are some things that people can do? I know it's kind of annoying too, because like people should be
Mhm.
doing their research and like they should know about this, but like, what would you say is ways people can get involved?
Yeah, so definitely don't feel bad about like, not being able to do research because the way things are currently is that there's so many resources, but they're either outdated back to like 2017 or even 2015 because no one is updating information, and which is why a lot of people are forgetting about this unspoken community. And if you want to contribute back, I honestly would probably call your local county office, and they typically have all that information updated. It's typically going to be under the Department of Child, Family, and Affair Services, and they'll have a list of events. They'll have a list of resources that you can provide, whether it be books, clothes, even food drives as well. I know, or especially around Christmas, they have the largest drive where you know kids who, like myself, I remember you write on a card asking for something and just wishing someone would get that for you, and so that's a huge thing. But definitely going to your local county and asking those type of questions for sure. And then since you're in the Bay Area, there's actually a place I think it's called think hackthehood.org have like local events with foster care kids, and also not even just them, but also kids who come from low income and try to help them get into tech and just being there. Because at the end of the day, it's not about providing a resource to these kids. I can speak from my own personal experience and also the experience of a couple of people that we're mentoring. You just want someone to care and to know that you do care without this, like, I need to get something back out of it. And that's the best way to help any foster youth.
And then you talk about mentoring. Is there a certain program that you're doing where you're mentoring or you're just helping out?
No, so me and Sorrel, we created a community called Get Fit Code. And Get Fit Code is just like Get Fit Dev. It's funny because you think Get Fit and you're like, oh, get fitness, and it's not. It's getting the opportunity to fit into a family or an environment where you never thought that you could. And so we're fostering this idea that, like, regardless of where you're at in life or regardless of where you come from, you're able to fit in with us. And you're not going to be looked at as a ward of the state, which is what foster youth are called, or you're not being looked at like, you know, as a young black man or a young Latino woman, anything like that. You're just looked at by your name in this super nerdy passion that you have for learning how to code or learning how to be the best product manager, QA tester, whatever it is. We want to help you grow. And so for two people who come from a terrible background to want to get back, like, we were like, yeah, we have to make this a thing. And so we took it upon ourselves to open up our schedules and start taking on people to mentor. And it's very much similar to like the path I took in to learn how to code. And so now we're able to do that and also provide more resources that wasn't available before. So now we're actually just, it's like almost like a boot camp, but free and no strings attached. You can keep going or stop. It's really up to you. And we provide like different challenges weekly. We have weekly meetings with, I think there's maybe like 10 or 12 people from all different backgrounds.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Yeah, before the quarantine, I helped out with like this organization called Street Code, and I would like teach a game design class, and it was just like the best part of my day, even like after work, just like seeing these kids code and like it's just so beautiful because they don't think that they're coding. They're just like, oh, I'm making this game, you know, and
Yeah.
just helping out like that, I feel like is so important. Okay, so then I really wanted to dive into your specific journey of learning to code.
Mhm.
So like, I know it took you 6 months before you got your first job, but
Mhm.
like what language did you start off with? Do you remember the resources you used?
Mhm. Yeah, I know the entire journey that I took. So the first course I took was on codecademy.com, and it was, you know, intro to JavaScript. And that was, I think it's like a 30-hour course. And I was like, oh, I can do it faster than 30 hours if I wanted to. And so I did that. And I was kind of like, well, it's kind of like the whole tortoise and the hare type thing. Like, well, there's no point to rushing it, you know? And so I went back to make sure I understood it. And so that was like the first step. It's like basically creating, like, the way I describe Code Academy is like it's allowing you to get used to coding, right? It's like very surface level knowledge of the concept that you're trying to learn, but it gets your hands onto something. So you're able to actually like type and like understand how to write a function or variables and so on. And then we went into Udemy. It's JavaScript understanding the weird parts. Now, this is a little bit more an in-depth course that actually teaches you everything that happens underneath the hood about JavaScript, where things that you didn't even think existed. And it was like very like in-depth. I remember sitting there like having to pause it like multiple times, and really kind of like let that information sink in. And I was like, all right, like cool. And it got so in depth to the point where like I had like this giant like notebook of things that I just constantly rewrote and like highlighted because it just went over so many things. And I think it works better than like reading eloquent JavaScript or even there's like another coding book, but it just explains so much. And like the biggest thing that people ask about for coding as a JavaScript web developer is like what a prototype is. And that's like a very important thing because if you know anything about objects, any object has a prototype because that allows for that base object to pass information along to like its child objects. And so when you understand that concept, like you're like, oh crap, I'm actually really starting to understand why these different parts are happening. And so that was like really nice. And then after that, I call these like little wins. And I started learning HTML and CSS. And the reason I call them little wins is because HTML is like, I feel like it's very easy to grasp. So I did that. And then CSS, if you really like making flashy things, you can dive further into CSS. But since I was like on this like timed um, outline for like my journey, I was like, I'm going to spend about maybe 3 weeks learning how to like do Flexbox, CSS, and really get in this idea of like how to design. And so I did that. So by 3 months in, I already knew JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, all vanilla stuff. And when I was like talking to my brother, since he was CTO for this company, he would just like bombard me with questions every day. And though he wasn't like, 100% like mentoring me or anything like that, because he, once again, he really wanted to be like an independent thing, because it's kind of like, oh, like it's either you want it or you don't, and so, but I would ask him questions because, the position that he's in, and in return, he would ask me lots of questions. So he really kind of like broke me into tech by like asking me like these interview style questions. And I didn't even realize they were interview style questions until I actually had my first interview like 6 months later. And then after that, I was still on Udemy and went to learn Angular. And it was the full guide of Angular, and it was by Max, and very very well written. And he explained so much about the concept and something like that. And I remember like looking at what Angular was, and you just get so much feedback from the tech community saying how hard it is, how much it is, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm going to go React because it's a lot more friendlier for new people." And so I was talking to my brother about it. He's an Angular guru. He will speak about Angular for days on end, and so of course he's going to back it up and say like, "Oh, Angular over React any day," And so he's like, "Courtney, like you overcame so much in life. If you can't do a course, then," he's like, "I don't know what to tell you." And so I was like, "All right, like fine." And, and so I started learning Angular, and then he encouraged me to write like not only take notes but also write like mini lectures as if I was like giving a class about the concepts that we're learning. And so I would do like a weekly class with him and two of the developers that are actually part of our community now, and actually explain these different concepts that I was learning. And I thought I was doing like terrible, just like any new developer that if you're in a boot camp or you're a CS student or you're like self-taught like I was, when you first start off, you feel like you're not doing well enough because you're just like, how can I, like someone who barely knows anything, teach you something? But the fact that you're able to write something down from a subject matter and be able to explain it to the point where a kid in elementary school can understand it means that you're understanding the concepts. And I didn't understand that until her name's Julie was like, yeah, she's like, I didn't know that happened for this. And she's like, I really thank you for like even teaching me that. And that became a continuous thing. And then after that, I did the full main stack course on Udemy, and that went into like Node.js, which is just more JavaScript, Express, and then I think that was about it. And I just really started like doing projects after projects. And when I was contributing more and more to MindRight, actually understand what tickets were, learning how to use Git and source control, and doing pull requests, and just really had this realm of knowledge that didn't know existed until up until this point. And then after that I was like, okay, like cool. I was like 5 months in, did a hackathon with, it's called BitCamp. It's in Maryland, that University of Maryland, where Major League Hacking goes. So people all over the country came to this, and it was like super fun. I have like videos of it. And, it was like super like Google style type hackathon where you play like Hungry Hungry Hippo with all the developers, and there was like Zumba, there was like Smash tournaments. It's everything that you imagined working at Google would be like, but it's everyone around your age. And no one asks, I feel like once you're in tech or a career field, no one asks about your background really, unless they're trying to get to know you. They just know that you're here to like do whatever task. And that's how it was during this hackathon. And so I was really feeling like I was part of this community 5 months in. And that's when I was like, I feel ready to start applying for jobs. And when you're applying for jobs, it is the most brutal thing ever, because you'll get a lot of no responses, or you'll get responses saying, sorry, like this application is closed out, or like, hey, like, we decided to move on with a different candidate. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot. And then interviews started to happen on that 6 month. And coding interviews are in a different experience and beast of their own, because you're sitting there, and if you think like writing your own like code is kind of nerve wracking, or when someone's checking out like a pull request of yours is nerve wracking, we have someone judging you every step of the way, every line of code within a time frame. Your heart's just like, and for someone who like been through so much and like went through different style of interviews in general, because like pre-nurse and had to like work with people all the time, I was still nervous. I was like, oh crap, like I have like 90 minutes to write out this entire solution and explain to you every step of the way. Oh, and there's three you guys? There's more than one round? What? So I was really just like, ah. And so obviously I didn't get my first job. And I forgot, it was like some like political company in DC. And I was like very like heartbroken because like they had all like the fixes as like you look forward to in tech, and you're like they had like happy hours served, and they had like little hackathons in the office. And it was just like this whole like awesome thing. And my brother always likes to tell me, especially more so then versus now, is like, hey, it's not about all the like the cool things that you get at the company. Like it's really just about the contribution they make, because that's how you grow, being more hands-on. But at the time I was just like, well, I just finished struggling through all this stuff and learning how to code. I kind of want a little bit of like this nice stuff. And so I kind of like tailored my search to that at first. And then I was kind of like no. Like I started branching out after, that excitement was over. I kind of blamed BitCamp for that, because it really was just like you get like caffeine chocolate. It was a lot that I was really looking forward to. And so I like started going through different recruiting agencies, and that's when my application and resume started like getting looked at a lot more. And that's when I took on my first contract role, and I moved to LA, and it was it started off just like HTML and stuff like that. And that was like a 3 month contract. And then I went to a company called TheraPlatform, where it was another mental health company. And I contracted with them for about 6 or 7 months, which is like a typical range for a contract. And they were doing Angular and ASP.NET, so C# backend. And that was really where it was like, oh wow, I really have to grow like here, because it was just me, the CTO of this company, and then the backend developer. And so, and my job was just do all the front end stuff. And then I had to teach myself React, because I had to maintain their React website while also doing another English. So it was just like already starting to wear multiple hats, and it's like very stressful, because you're like, I don't know if I can do it. Like, how do I even get here? And I guess that's essentially like imposter syndrome, feeling like you're not worthy enough to be where you're at, and it's based off on luck. But in reality, you did the interview. Clearly, you have the talent, and you have every right to be there. The job itself is supposed to be hard and challenging. Anyone can look up a coding interview question and present that to another individual. But to understand and recognize that, hey, this is a problem that we have for you, and be able to find a solution for it, that's what development's all about. And so I started to come into my own by realizing like, oh, wow, like, okay, that is the main focus of it. And so I started like doing more and more like research and going to meetups and doing coffee and code and talking to more developers, while also talking to like my older brother as well. But I didn't want to lean on him too much because you want to be your own person. You don't want to just like be in the shadow of someone else. And he never did that. But like it was just like me just wanting to break out because as someone who grew up independent and had to solely rely on himself, I wanted to be recognized as Courtney, the software engineer, by himself without like, oh, Courtney, the software engineer, because of his brother or because of like whatever resources. I was like, no, like I got here, like, you're getting here. And so I had two choices by October to work with Kaiser or work with Sacramento County after my contract at their platform ended. Kaiser is considered a private company. You typically have more benefits, you make a little bit more money, but also it's at a little bit faster pace. But I chose Sacramento County because I had more of an influence, not only on the tech stuff that I'm working with, but also I get to directly create applications from the background that I come from. So I was like, 100%, I'm going to choose the county for that. And yeah, so that's kind of like my route and how I got here.
Nice. And then, so would you recommend JavaScript as a language for someone that wants to get into the tech world?
I personally say JavaScript because it's multi-platform. You can do not only web development, but you also do mobile development as well. And a lot of people have the hard time deciding between web and mobile in the first place. So I'm just like, well, what if you could do both? You're like, well, why limit yourself to like one option? And so by choosing a universal language and having so much like versatility like JavaScript, I feel like it's perfect. And there's also some complexities that JavaScript provides that other languages don't provide. And so I was like, I personally would choose that. Since I do TypeScript a lot for Angular, JavaScript's like you have to know JavaScript because TypeScript is basically JavaScript, but with strict typing. And so it made it more of an object-oriented programming language. And so I definitely, and also if you want to know like the hot new languages like React, JavaScript's definitely the way to go for that. So.
And then what's like the number one, I know it might be hard to choose just one, but the number one piece of advice you would give to new coders, maybe they're like a week in, a month in, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, so I have a tattoo on my chest and it says the shark that doesn't swim drowns. And so if you're consistently trying to move forward and keep going, you eventually kind of drown and metaphorically like die. And as a developer, there's going to be tons of problems that you're going to face. And there's going to be tons of different scenarios that you're going to be put in. And you're going to meet people who are like way more experienced than you. There's going to be people who are like at the same level as you. But you don't want to be too fixated on one problem. Don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. No one's ever going to judge you for asking for help. They're going to more likely judge you for not asking for help, if anything. And just genuinely just keep trying to move forward. Progress is everything. You don't have to be perfect. Just make progress. And that could be an extra 10 minutes a day. That could be reading another blog article a day or asking another question a day. Just know that you're not alone in this community. There's tons of resources and people who are willing to help. So don't be afraid to ask for it. And, you can't land on the moon if you don't reach for the stars, So if you're looking to get to the next level, shoot as far as you can. Just branch out and just keep moving forward. And that's what I would say.
Nice. And then do you feel like that's also a part of your journey? Because I'm wondering, like, because you went through that like Code Academy course, then Udemy and all that stuff, like what really motivated you to keep going? I think a lot of people might start a course, do it for 2 months, and then like stop it.
Yeah, so what really motivated me to keep going is really just understanding why am I doing in the first place? And besides like my own personal background, not having a safety net, like if I fail at this, like there's no one there to catch me, you know? So, I mean, that was one motivator, but also it's just like, well, why do I want to learn how to code in the first place? Do I want to just make cool projects just to make it? Do I want to make money just to make it? Like, what's the whole point? And for me, it was recognizing that coding in itself is a career where it's not based on, you know, having family relations to get you into something. It's not who you know. It's really based on skill and like and merit and how hard you're willing to work. As a person who had to work for everything in life, I knew that I want to be a part of something that I wasn't judged based on being a former prostitute, but based on what I was willing to do if I was presented with tasks and stuff like that. And so after each course, it was kind of like, well, I'm one more step closer to being able to do that, to being a part of this community. And also, coding provides the sense of monetary freedom. You hear a lot about developers making a ridiculous amount of money, whether it be from Google, Amazon, any of the type of FANG companies, essentially. And also, there's a lot of companies that you can work for to create a change with. And MindRight was one of them. And now I'm working with the county, although it's a public company, the fact that I can create a change for other people's lives, that's what really, it was just like, I could do that. That's what I wanted to do, is provide that change and also having, you know, the freedom to do so. So that's why I kept coding.
Sorry.
Oh no, you're awesome. You know, so people that like inspire me, like growing up, since I didn't have parents or like individuals at the time to really like help me get to where I was going, I listened to like a lot of like motivational like videos and stuff like that. And a lot of people are like, oh, like those things don't help. I'm like, well, they're not supposed to give you like the answers to life. You know, they're supposed to help you recognize like, hey, there's like greatness inside all of us. And so that's something I try to give back to others. So my brother being one of the people that inspire me, you know, because he was that first role model showing me like, hey, he came from this background and got to where he was. And I was like, I could do that. Dr. Eric Thomas is another person, you know, born in Detroit, Michigan, you know, terrible upbringing. He was homeless, you know, a lot of different things that he experiences, you know, what I experienced, you know, and so he became one. And then there's another person named Inky Johnson who like got paralyzed in college, and he like his way of like looking at life is your perspective drives your performance, you know, and that is one of the most hard hitting quotes I've ever like really cared about, because you can look at, you know, how bad your life is or how opportunistic, I think that's how you say the word, but how much opportunities you have in your life based on your situation. You know, COVID is very, you know, much a traumatic experience in our lives, and it's taken a lot of people to negative paths, but this is an opportunity to kind of like really focus on yourself and, you know, grow as a person. And I'm not saying you have to like go out and write a book or create some type of change, but it's recognizing like, hey, like, you know, you're a person and you don't have to just live for work and stuff like that. And recognizing like, yeah, your perspective, you know, is going to make you want to be the person you are. And so those people inspired me. And so when I'm looking at people that I like associate myself with and call friends or call family, you know, I want to like covet those ideas with them, because like we all share the same, essentially kind of the same passion of wanting to make a difference for others. And, you know, really like, hey, like we're all from different backgrounds, but, you know, life is hard out there. So at least with each other and the people we want to help grow, like show them like, you know, life can be a lot nicer. And so, yeah, try to do that too.
A random question. I feel like college, when you were in college and everything,
Mm-hmm.
like, this is so weird, but did you find the material hard? Because I'm kind of getting a vibe, like, because of everything you've been through, I feel like you, and I feel like in the moment you were just kind of like, because I think in some people's lives, like college is like the hardest thing they'll go through, you know. But like, I kind of want to dig into like your mindset. Like, you made 4.3 GPA, 3.9 GPA. Like, what is your relationship kind of with like school, if that makes sense, and studying and all that?
Oh, for sure. So school in itself has always been my escape. I was very like, since, all the way up through high school, it was kind of like, oh, I need to do this. So I had no choice but to strive for pure excellence and really focus on it. Like I didn't like date in high school. I didn't let anything distract me from like achieving like the top performance I could. And that's how I got to there. And also school provided a structure. Most foster youth suffer from not having structure in their life. So the fact that high school provided me, that 8 to 3 and then sports, it allowed me to excel while also not being, at home in this toxic environment. College was challenging because I didn't know that I had ADHD growing up. And when I started seeing therapy my freshman semester of college, um, he saw that I was very like fidgety and was constantly like, just like all over the place. And he was asking me different questions, and I didn't know if he was like already evaluating me about ADHD. And he was like, "Hey," like, and then he started asking me like these type of questions. And the material itself wasn't hard at university, just because I I don't know. I had more like one-on-one attention with the professor since our class sizes were about 10 to 15 students. So they
Ooh.
were able to like explain it more and like provide that type of like resources and stuff like that. Um, but it was the lack of structure that provided the most challenging experience for me, because when you remove yourself from a structured environment, it's hard to adjust. It's like people coming out of the military or prison where you're so used to things being this way, like you don't know how to react when you're back into normal society. And that's how college felt, where you had so much freedom and control to do whatever you want. You're like, I don't know what to do. And so you just don't do anything, or you do way too much of one thing. And that's how a lot of people end up like doing drugs or getting kicked out of school. And because I think at the time, it was like around 60% of foster youth ended up incarcerated like back in 2014, because you're seeking some type of structure. So you're doing whatever you can to find that. And so they act out and they end up back in the system where they can have that structure. And once I was able to realize that ADHD, I started teaching myself like little tricks to kind of help focus. And that's either like counting, counting the taps every time I tap my leg, or which kind of sucked, doing all-nighters, because since I wasn't able to focus during the day, I was by myself at night, so I can like hammer down the material and write it over and over and over again, or like highlight things and just really isolate myself in order to learn what I had to learn in order to like pass the class essentially. So, I mean, there's always like challenging courses, I feel like, in any curriculum, but I never felt like it was the material itself was challenging. It was just focusing on the material. And Eric Thomas said, it's very easy to say that you're bad at something because you're not really 100% committed to be wanting to learn it. And it's just like, well, a lot of people hate math. Sorrel, older brother, loves math. I'm not bad at math, but I don't like it. He loves it. And so I had to ask myself, like, what experience have I had that associated this terrible feeling about not liking math? And that's because up to this point, I never met a person who liked math. Everyone that I met just hates math. It's kind of like being in a relationship. If they're always negative to you, and then they do that one good thing, you're like, oh my gosh, like it's gonna be a shock to the system. And so every relationship that you have with a particular course or material, you have to kind of take a step back and remove that underlying bias that you have towards it and be like, okay, like I'm willing to learn this. You know, learning is not easy and it's not supposed to be easy, you know, because there's going to be so many things around you that are going to cause distraction, but you kind of have to sacrifice what you are for who you want to become. So if that means not going out every weekend so you can pass this class, do that. If that means staying an extra hour instead of going home playing video games, do that. If that means, not being able to be in a relationship because you have like 18 credits plus you're working a like full-time job, do that. You yourself come first. You know, when you're on an airplane, they're saying in case of emergency, put your mask on before you help someone else. And that's kind of how you should travel through life, where because if you can't help yourself first, you can't help others. You know, if you're in a terrible environment, and not be able to like provide food for yourself on the table, you can't be like, oh, let me just go buy groceries for everybody else, because then you're starving and then you'll eventually die. So it's about finding that natural balance where you're like, hey, I need to take care of myself. I need to open myself up to these new relationships with the materials, and just like saying, instead of saying I can't, just saying I'm going to try, and recognizing that I can get help if I need it. And so that's kind of like my experience with it. Hopefully I answered your question. I know there was like a little slight tangent.
And then I know it was from you doing a hackathon was like part of the reason why you felt ready to start like applying to jobs. But what advice would you give for people in that department? Because a lot of people might keep doing projects, keep doing tutorials, keep learning frameworks. Like, when do you think they should actually just start applying?
So basically, you're never going to know when you're job ready until you start applying. And the best way to learn how to to learn where you're at is by failing at something. And so when you're consistently applying for jobs and you're getting no back, or you're going to a coding interview and they're providing feedback on why you didn't get the job for not being able to pass this interview, you start to realize what you actually need to know in order to get a job. And if you feel like, hey, I'm tired of being, I'm tired of just learning like a tutorial or this specific framework, and you want to branch out more and you want to start, working for a company, just do it. Like there's no guideline or timeline to be like, hey, this is when you should do it. Some people are like, oh, you have to learn a full stack to do that. Some people are just like, no, you just need to know JavaScript or Python or one specific language. Only you are going to know when to do it. So might as well just put yourself out there to do it and just go from there. And that's what I would say.
Yeah. I think in general, we're just so scared to fail. Like that just, scares us, but really just trying.
Like people have this idea that failure is negative, but failing is just another step to success, because you're not going to know how to get somewhere unless you fail at something. How else are you going to accept feedback or understand what you're missing if you never fail and realize, oh, these are the holes in like whatever you're trying to do. So if people looked at failure as a way to get to success, I think people would definitely be more open to it.
I love that. Failure is a way to get to success. 100% agree. And kind of like your tattoo, I love the quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's kind of like you just got to try, so I love that so much.
Yeah.
And then if people want to get involved with I think Get Fit Code is the name of your organization. How can they do that? Where can they find it?
Yeah, so Get Fit Code is on Discord. We're also creating a YouTube channel and eventually a podcast as well. But if you're interested, don't be afraid to hit myself up on Instagram, which is my main platform I use, at Get Fit Dev, or also my brother at Sorrel. And we'll send you a link and have you be a part of it. And if you want to talk and actually interact with the mentees, we can definitely have that too. More people, the better. It's about fostering a community where you feel like you belong. And if you're looking for a community where you want to belong and be a part of change, then ask us. We're more than welcome to invite you in and have you be a part of this large, loving family, and helping people become better, whether that be ourselves or you or just anyone and everyone.